Hello everyone, and welcome to the second part of our mini course about the history of the Hanukkah lamp and the Maccabees. So in the previous lecture, for those of you who attended, I'll summarize very briefly. We dealt with the invention of the holiday, you can say, how Hanukkah was created and why. We spoke about the emphasis of the rabbis of old on the miracle rather than on the heroism of the Maccabees, and the emergence of one item that became to be the symbol of the miracle and the holiday, and this is the Hanukkah lamp. We saw that over a period of about 800-900 years since the beginning of the Middle Ages and on, the lamp developed in a very, you can say, creative way, very inventive way. Every community developed its own way of how to emphasize the meaning of the holiday, using a lot of imagination, and actually the object emerged as one of the most beautiful, the most impressive objects of Judaica. So we arrived more or less last time to the year 1800. We saw items from Eastern Europe that were created in the 18th century. And today, I want to dedicate our time to the 19th and 20th century, mostly concentrating on the land of Israel. But I want to begin with Germany because to contrast what was happening in Palestine of the time, we have to see how emancipation affected the story of Hanukkah in briefly, and the Hanukkah lamp in particular. And since we are short in time, we'll do it with Germany. That's, I think, the best example to see what happened to this item that we are discussing and how it changed over the course of the 19th century before the emergence of Zionism. So I want to begin with a painting by the most important German Jewish artist of the 19th century, and this is Moritz Daniel Oppenheim, who, as you can see from his dates, he lived throughout the century. He was born at the beginning and passed away in 1882. And he is a good example of what happened to German Jews in this period, including the Jewish issues that were very much part of his life. I mean, he wanted to be a painter. It wasn't so easy in his time. He considered even converting to Christianity, like some other Jewish artists did. And he was really fighting with these sentiments, you can say, many years of his, especially young years of his life, when he was looking for his way to become an artist, to become a well-known artist. Finally, he made the decision to be an Orthodox, more or less Jew, in how we define it today. When he decides that, he's already not young, and then he dedicates a lot of time to the life of his childhood. He makes a series of paintings, one of which we are looking at now, that describe the ceremonies, the rituals of Judaism as he remembered them from the time he was a child, just on the eve, let's say, the beginning of emancipation, and that when life in Germany, Jewish life in Germany, was still very traditional. So in this painting that is in the Israel Museum, we can see the ceremony of Hanukkah, the ritual of Hanukkah at home, where all the family participates, children and the adults and the grandfather, and lighting two Hanukkah lamps. We see the father is lighting one, the child is lighting another one. The children are playing with dreidels here, and the grandfather is smoking, and there are other members of the family in the other room, and so on. The situation when he makes this painting is not the same. I mean, it's not the same. Families, most German Jewish families don't celebrate it in this way. It's a period of, let's say, the second half of the 19th century by now. And besides the Orthodox families, most German Jews who are not Orthodox are not doing it in the same way. So what about the Hanukkah lamp? So the Hanukkah lamps of the past, of the 18th century, let's say, or even before, that were very magnificent, and especially in Germany, almost ceased to appear. Only the wealthy families that were still very much interested in Judaism continued to do them. So the first pair that I want to show you, here's a detail from the painting that I was describing, and you can see how everything is going on. Okay, so here are two examples. One, the one on the right, this one, is from the 18th century, and some of you asked about who made them. So in this case, we know exactly the name of the silversmith, Johann Adam Boller, who made this magnificent lamp in Frankfurt in the beginning of the 18th century for the elite families, elite Jewish families. He worked with them in Frankfurt. And it's, as you can see, make those silver, big one, very, with a figure above here, and looks, something that was, a lot of money was invested in the production. Things like that, like we see in the 18th century, we see several of these. In the 19th century, we have one or two that are still being produced, and they are like the last remnants of this glorious period, like the one that we see on the left, that we call it the Hirsch menorah. In a second, we'll explain why. It was created at the beginning of the 19th century, still like the nostalgia of Oppenheim, someone who is, let's say, thinking about the past more, although the design is already 19th century. Let's see a detail of that. Here is the front side of the menorah, and you can see of this lamp, and you can see that the artist created for him, for the patron, like a city scene, or with palace and pillars, and like a very impressive building with a dome, and the gable, triangular gable, with lights even of the street that you can see. A whole scene is created for Hanukkah, and animals are there behind. It's hard to see everything. And we can even identify who is the person, and also we know the year because of a verse that is written here in Hebrew about the prophet Samuel that took the oil jar and poured it on the lamp, on the menorah. And so we know that the person who commissioned it was apparently, his name was Samuel, and the letters that are marked, there is a circle above them, like over the shin, over the hair, and so on. If you calculate them, you'll come to the year that they mentioned. So your name was Shmuel. We know also because there is a pair of deer here. On each one is written Shmuel, and probably that was his first name, and his last name was probably Hirsch, because it's on the deer here, and the deer, as I mentioned in the last lecture, was used also for the name Hirsch. So that's the name. It's unknown exactly who he was, but anyway, we know also that he was probably a Freemason. So this example that we see here, of course, it's now neoclassical architecture, like we saw in the previous lecture, Gothic structures that influence the Hanukkah lamp, or Renaissance palazzi. Here is neoclassical design with this gable that we see here, like here. We see the domed structure. You see the balustrade here, the balustrade in the same place. And instead of the statues, here you have some decorations. But it's definitely, we are speaking the language of neoclassical architecture with these pillars, Corinthian capitals, like we see in this church in Vienna. Okay, so that was, as I said, the height of German Hanukkah lamps design in the period before the modern times. And since then, we have sort of a decline that lasts throughout the 19th century. The Hanukkah lamps that are produced in most of the 19th century are simple, like those two that we see now, are made of simple metals, not very creative, and although they are charming as folk art, to be sure, but they are not highly decorated and made even of metals like lead that are very inexpensive and so on. Excuse me. Yes, or here is another one. You can see how crude it is, and you need what you need, whatever is needed to fill the oil and so on. Some that are more creative, that I'll show you, are especially from Alsace, from the other part, you can say, of German-speaking Jews or German Jewish dialects, where there is a very special and interesting custom, and that's why I'm showing these lamps, where you have more than one row of spouts to light the menorah. Here is one, and here is a second one, and here you have one 2, 3, for all members of the family or for the father and his eldest son to lit the same oil lamp together, the same menorah together. This is something unique to Alsace and some parts of South Germany that we don't know from other communities, and I thought it's a nice custom to mention here. And if we speak about simple lamps that become very playful and repeated patterns, here is something that was very common in Germany in the second half of the 19th century and spread to some other German-speaking lands. Cast chair that you do in the shape of this like one chair for each light, and from the same mold you cast as many pieces as you want, and it's from lead. It's very simple, again, metal, and you can make a Hanukkah lamp in this way that is very simple, playful, like we saw the children playing with the dreidel. The dreidel were done also more or less in the same kind of technique. And you can arrange them the way that you want, and so on. The letters Nun Chet that you see here, Ner Hanukkah. Yes, that's what it means. Okay, so even I want to show you the last lamp from Germany. Is very, again, to see the simplicity of these lamps before, again, the Bauhaus period in the 20th century, where, again, we have modern, beautiful lamps. This lamp that we see is made from a plate, like, that you eat from. And I'm showing you from both sides. Someone cut it into the half and added this like structure here, and on it these things. I don't know where he picked them in his, probably around the house that were. And here is a Hanukkah lamp, a kosher one, a very good one, done in the same country where the magnificent lamps of the past were done. So actually the holiday of Hanukkah became less and less significant, like other holidays, for most of German Jewry that was looking to be very, let's say, as close as it could to the non-Jewish society of the, I'm speaking about, let's say, 1880, 1890s, 1900. For those of you who want a little bit about, let's say, the folklore of the time or the background, you can read the memoirs of Gershom Shalom, for example, on his childhood and see how it was in the Jewish homes of these times and how little Judaism played a role. So the result is something like this, that we see objects related to the holidays, including for Hanukkah. I'll show in a second. This is a New Year card from 1906. You can see the date written in the year, not only for the Jewish year. You have the Jewish year as well, but in numbers, not in the letters as we know. It says here in Hebrew Rosh Hashanah, but the rest is all in German, and we see Christmas tree and the colors green and red are not exactly Jewish, although you have a Magen David in the center. And for Hanukkah, we have a caricature from these years that expresses what was going on. Here is the process that was going in many German Jewish homes of how the Hanukkah lamps becomes a Christmas tree. And the caption below this caricature, translated into English, is how the Hanukkah lamp of the goatskin merchant, which is the typical Jewish profession of the let's say, the city people of the 19th century, of the goatskin merchant Cohen, turned to the Christmas tree of the management consultant Herr Konrad of Tiergartenstrasse in central Berlin. Okay, so you see the process by changing of the name and how Hanukkah is becoming. So against this, now we want to see what happened in Palestine of that period. Because Palestine was still, with the period that I just described, was still a shtetl in many ways. It was a shtetl in remote place of the world at the time. We're speaking, let's say, mid-19th century to almost the end of that century. Under Ottoman rule, the Ottomans did not consider it very highly. This town, it wasn't too significant for them from religious or administrative point of view. And the life in the old city of Jerusalem was very miserable, a lot of poverty and not very healthy, and so on. And you can read again memoirs for those who like the memoirs of Mark Twain, who visited the Holy Land in this period, and how upset he was of what he saw. So these are just some views that I want to show you of the city before we go to see how Hanukkah was evoked in this city. So here is the city of Jerusalem as it looked in this period. And as I said, most of the life in Jerusalem was just in the walled city. Yes, hardly anyone was going out of the old city at that time. The gates were closed at night, and people won't go out because there are robbers and there are animals around. So this is the old city, and around it is like empty. Yes, this view, for those who visited Jerusalem know it very well. It's on the way going to Mount Zion, and here is what we call the Pool of the Sultan. Yes, okay. So just this way, where today's Mishkanot Sha'ananim here and so on. And so this part of the world, I mean, even when you go out of the city, we do it with animals very carefully, and donkeys and camels were still around near the Tower of David of today. Okay, so the city changes, as we know, toward the second half, let's say the 1870s, 1880s. Some houses are built outside the city walls, and the city starts to grow. So here is the same point of view, now looking about 20, 25 years later. Yes, that we saw now. It's paved way, and there are some houses here, and so on. And this is how it looked, the same again spot, more or less, I mean from the other side now, from Migdal David, in the British times, in the 1930s, with buses, and there is market here, and many houses in the background, and so on. So the city develops quickly in this period, and it's very important to understand because this will influence how the holiday and the lamp in particular will be shaped, because there is more and more interest and culture that is coming to the city, and it influences the production of objects as well. And so the residents of the old city of Jerusalem, I mean the Jewish residents of course, were men mostly of two communities, Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, and each one was dressed in the manner that is easily identifiable, and the language that they spoke was different. The Ashkenazim spoke Yiddish, the Sfaradim knew Arabic, they spoke Ladino, they dressed more like the local population. Many of them came from the Ottoman Empire, from other parts of the empire, from Turkey, and especially of today, Greece, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and so on. And that's how these look, these groups that you can see here. And of course they met and they were together in the same city. So some of the pictures even commemorate these meetings. You can say here is a Sephardi Chacham and two Ashkenazi rabbis are in around 1890. Okay, this photograph. Okay, so just some numbers before we go to the Hanukkah lamps of how many people lived in Eretz Israel at that time. We'll concentrate again on Jerusalem, again for lack of time, but you can see some figures here. So the total population of Jerusalem in the year 1800 was 9,000, that's all, of which 2,250, about 25%, were Jews, okay? We know now most of them were Sfaradim, but we won't go into this now. In 1840, we have total of 13,000, out of which 5,000 are Jews. So we grow now to 40%. Okay, 1880, 30,000 total population of Jerusalem, and 18,000 of which are Jews. And 1914, after already we have the first aliyot, the first, let's say the Zionist movement is already working, and there are immigrants that are coming, not from the old Yishuv, so the number is by now is 70,000 total of population of Jerusalem, 45 of which is 65%, are Jews. Okay, so we see how the picture changed dramatically in this period. So the Hanukkah lamps of the old Yishuv, as we call it, of the Sfaradim and Ashkenazim and other communities that lived in Jerusalem were very traditional because they continued the state alive, as I said, as it was in the past in other communities or where they came from. It's almost, you can say, it's a good exercise for students of Jewish art to take items from 19th century Jerusalem and try to identify without reading or without reading inscriptions, to identify from which country the maker was, because almost every item is done according to the tradition of that person, whether it's from Poland or from Yemen, doesn't matter. So here we have two Hanukkah lamps, one Ashkenazi, one Sephardi. I'm showing you, I selected two of this type. The Ashkenazi one that is on the left is still continued that tradition in Jerusalem to today. You can see it in Mea Shearim. It's like a case with glass windows, so that, and they put the cups with the oil inside so that they are not extinguished by the wind. So that's and the bottom one is, remember, it's almost similar to the one that we saw last week for medieval Spain. This tradition of a triangular background, and this is something that was still common in some of the communities, and it's definitely also from the method it's done and so on. It's a Sephardi one. And you can see that other communities are also bringing their traditions to Jerusalem and even changing them in an interesting way. Here, last week we saw some of the Yemenite Hanukkah lamps, and I remind you they were made of stone. So here is a Yemenite Hanukkah lamp that was probably produced in the Holy Land, in Jerusalem, and it's also made of stone, but it has now the landscape in a way of Jerusalem. You see the crenellation of the walls of Jerusalem here. You see like a gate here and the staircase and so on. So it's a Yemenite tradition, but becoming locally. And the interesting type of lamp that developed locally and became very popular apparently in the second half of the 19th century, I'm showing you 3 examples here, are these folding lamps. Again, very traditional, very oriental looking. I mean, they are type that was common in Islamic lands, and I'll explain in a second why. They are called they are folding lamps because this part that is with the place where you put the oil in cups in these rings, it can fold to the top, and that's how it looks when you fold it. And so they are called in the literature, especially of the past, today we are not certain this title is correct, they are called Shadar type lamps, meaning that they were taken by people who traveled to fundraise for the poor of Jerusalem. So they can fold them, they would carry them with them. The mitzvah is to light candles even when you travel. So you have to carry your own Hanukkah lamp. So they can carry them in this way very easily. They are not heavy. You don't need the glasses. You can get glasses everywhere that you get to. And it doesn't take much place, and it's light. It's made of tin or brass. They are very light and simple. And of course, the Shadar, the person who travels, needs protection. So that's why you have many magical designs, like the Hamsa that is protecting this person. Here is one that was sold last night in an auction. So I even considered to change the caption, but I didn't. So here is another one, folding lamp. But here, what's interesting, we have the name of the person for whom it was made. Again, very simple, very crude, real folk art. And his name is written here in the second line, Yona Seadia Hamechune Morenu Navon, a historical figure. We know exactly who he was. You can read his biography, short biography written by the father of Yoram Gaon, Moshe David Gaon, who was a scholar of the Sephardim here in Jerusalem. And so we see this lamp, let me show you. And all the designs here are to protect him. You have a pair of fish, you have an eye against the evil eye, you have the Magen David, even the number of rings is very carefully calculated. 9 on this fish, 9 on this one, 18, Chai, yes, we are in Beta Vichai, so we have to mention this. And the number of rings here inside the evil eye, inside the Magen David, will come again to 18. So Chai is doubly protected when he carries this lamp with him. Okay, here is a detail you can see with his name, and the verse that is written above, Kiner Mitzvah V'Torah Or, the verse from Proverbs that I mentioned last week, that is the one that was associated with Hanukkah since antiquity. From the Bible, yeah, where the Hanukkah holiday is not mentioned, I remind you. Okay, so as I said, he is a historical figure. Here is his tomb in the Mount of Olives, and here is the epitaph, you can read it, describing his life in short, not every detail, but just that he died before time, of course, and the date that he died is 1909. Yes, Morenu Navon, by the way, Navon is the same Navon family where the 5th president of Israel, Yitzhak Navon, the same related family. Okay. So some of the lamps of just before that, we saw that all these lamps that I was showing you, the folding lamps, have places to put the oil cups. Yes, oil glasses usually colorful. So all of these, of course, don't have them, but some that we have from other Islamic lands survived with the glasses. Like this one is from Baghdad, from Ottoman Baghdad. We spoke, by the way, last week about national emblems, and here you can see at top the crescent and the star of the Ottoman Empire. Yes. So this was, of course, produced in Baghdad before 1917, before the British Mandate, when Iraq was still Ottoman. And you have also here protection with the Khamsas, and on one of them is written Ben Porat Yosef, which is the most favorite verse, I think, of Iraqi Jews in the Bible. This is the best protection that you can get if you are the son of Joseph. Anyway, so this is how the cups look like. Here is from Bnei Israel in Bombay. I want to show you also how this Hanukkah lamp with cups looks like. Here also is a Zionist one with Magen David and the word Zion inside it. And this is how they light Bnei Israel, this type of lamp with the glasses. Okay, so you put oil in the glass and the wick is above, floating, and you lit it in this way. Okay, so let's go back to the old Yishuv. 2 more examples I want to show you are these two now that we are, this one, it's one, in 2 slides. It's again for traveler, you can say. It folds into, becomes like a box, looks like a cigarette box or tobacco box after it's, but when you open it, it has these compartments where you can lit your lamp in this way. And so the cover of the box, it's made of silver, it's more luxurious one than the others that I showed you before. The cover of this box showed the most favorite image of the old city of Jerusalem. We can say the logo of the old Yishuv, and this is the Kotel, the Western Wall. 2 structures that look very simple here, but one is the Temple of Jerusalem, the other one they call Midrash Shlomo, the School of Solomon, and this is the Temple Mount in the center with cypress trees over. I'll show you another example of this and then I'll say something more about it. Here is another Hanukkah lamp from the old Yishuv that shows a fuller picture of this design, and here Kotel HaMaravi is identified, and you can see that the structure that I call the second, they go Bet HaMikdash, the temple, is actually the Dome of the Rock with the crescent above, while the other building to the right, also as a crescent at the top, is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is what they saw from the Jewish quarter, and this picture became, like as I said, the logo of Jerusalem. It has a long history, but we won't go into it now. But anyway, this is the most familiar, you can say, design to identify the city. So you can see how popular it was. I'm showing you something here not related to Hanukkah, just as you see how popular it was, and when these items have titles, you can identify what they are. So it says here, Kotel HaMaravi, above, yes, Midrash Shlomo, the School of Solomon, further Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Mekom HaMikdash. Mekom HaMikdash is the kuf is missing here. It's very folkloristic item. It's usually was done by was made. Now I have to correct myself. Was made by young women as preparation for their marriages, and to take it to the new home where they would live and hang it on the wall in the old city of Jerusalem. So it's an embroidery on a perforated cardboard, and the design was probably done by someone else, and they would embroider with these colorful threads these beautiful designs. The cypress trees, by the way, that you see are symbol of the temple of Jerusalem. They are what they called in Hebrew Atzea Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon, from which King Solomon built his temple, and they were identified in the old Yishuv as the emblem of the temple in this way. Okay, so the last temple that I want to show you, and maybe the most magnificent one from the old Yishuv, is this one, that is like some others that we saw before in the old Yishuv Court Museum, Chatzar HaYishuv HaYashan, in the old city of Jerusalem, this museum that commemorates life in the old Yishuv. And this Hanukkah lamp that we know only two existing of this type, this one in this museum and the other one in the Israel Museum, is highly folkloristic, is all made of glass beads that are like you see. I'll show you a detail in a second into this design. It's by Ashkenazi families that we know, made it in Jerusalem. And it says Le'adlik ner Chanukah, and it is design that even makes you closer, you can say, to the Temple Mount, to Jerusalem. Let me show you detail, and then I'll discuss it further. So we have three designs. You have the menorah. This is, by the way, a Shiviti tablet from the old Yishuv. So you see the menorah lit with the flames towards the center. Here we see the menorah in this way with a tripod leg, like we see here, and the menorah is flanked in this type of objects by two items usually, or sometimes more. So one is what is called in Hebrew kevesh. It's the ramp with stairs that leads to, you can climb it to get to the height that you need to put the light in the branches of the menorah. And the other item that is on the other side, they are not on the same side. You can see here it's this kevesh, and here it's on the other side, but this is the item. And the other item is the jar to pour the oil into the lamp. So this is pach hashemen and kevesh. That's how they are called in Hebrew. And by the way, you see these trees are called here Arzea Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon. Okay. So here, now let me show you a detail of this. You can see the beauty of this, how it's done in very careful, tedious way, with strings holding the beads together that you can see. And the design, of course, you put the glass in the color that you want to make the design, and the inscription, Le'adlik ner Chanukah. Okay, so now that you are, let's say, you see the sentiments of the people in Jerusalem, that the emphasis that they put on the Temple Mount on one hand and the temple implements. These two we see very clearly on the Hanukkah lamps, and I think it's one of the main reasons is because they are in Jerusalem and they know the place and they know the area. And from the old Jewish quarter where they were living, they could see it every day. And they know what was once there. So they want the glory to return, I think. So what happened, the glory is, I'm thinking about this, when Jerusalem was in Jewish hands in the past, when it was independent, when it was the largest in the past as a Jewish town, before its destruction. We are looking at the model created by Professor Michael Aviona, my first teacher in classical art, who passed away many years ago, who built this model in the 1960s in the Holy Land Hotel, and today is in the Israel Museum. I think many of you know it. It's just before the year 70 AD. It represents Jerusalem at its height, as I said, just before the destruction, with the temple, yes, as a central piece, the Temple of Jerusalem, that the last one to build it was King Herod. But this temple was, I remind you, is the temple that was rededicated by the Maccabees. And the menorah inside this temple is the menorah of the Maccabees, that was, yes? And this menorah was taken, here we see imaginary picture from the 19th century again, of how the Titus and his army is entering the Temple Mount, killing everyone that they found there, and putting it on fire. And they are taking, here is the detail, they are taking the menorah from the temple, they are saving it to take it to Rome. Yes, it's imaginary picture, but it illustrates nicely the story. And the menorah, of course, ended in Rome, as it's commemorated on the Arch of Titus. So who are those who made this? Who are those who made it possible, you can say? Of course, these are the Maccabees, I want to remind you. And now we have the movement that wants to redo it, you can say. So we're speaking about late 19th century, starting in Europe and then moving to the Holy Land, with Herzl and this dream to recreate this legend, you can say. And so when they look, Herzl and his friends, whether in the Europe or in Palestine of the time, for, let's say, who was the one who did it in the past, they found in Jewish history the Maccabees, the story of the Maccabees, that, as I said, was not so central for many, many years. It was not told, it was not something to be proud of, but they find this story very relevant to them, because here there was a group of people, not the elite, simple people, villagers, that united to free Jerusalem and Israel of the time from the hands of the that took it by power. That's they could identify with the story of the Maccabees very easily and seeing it as a, as a model. And so they start to write about it, and they'll just some quotes that I want to give you. For example, Herzl wrote in the Judenstadt, in the Jewish state, in 1866, "I believe that a new generation of wonderful Jews will grow from the earth of today, and the Maccabees will stand for us again." Eliezer ben Yehuda, who is in Jerusalem, writes these things. Now, let me read one or two quotes from him. The holiday of the national freedom, which was given to the Jewish people by the Maccabees, the fighters for freedom, this holiday is closer to our hearts and to our feelings than any other holiday in the Jewish year. So that's what he writes, and the others writing in the same, with the same ideology, and they find the deeds of the Maccabees as something that should be repeated. We should do like them. We should restart the history of Judaism now from that point and liberate Jerusalem again, and so on. So as I said, Judah the Maccabees is the model for someone who fought against Nicanor. Nicanor is the people who hold Jerusalem at that time, and you can see the models in this way that we need someone like Judah of the past. Bar Kokhba is emerging as well at this time as heroes that could do something, powerful, using force to liberate the Jews and not only sit in the yeshiva and pray. So one of the persons who very much involved in all this is Boris Schatz. Boris Schatz, who met with Herzl and was part of this ideology, is also joining forces, you can say, with this ideology, and he speaks about that a lot. He's even helpful in finding where is the place where the Maccabees are buried in the Holy Land. We'll come to this issue in a second. So he establishes the school of Bezalel, the famous school of Bezalel, here in Jerusalem, in Shmuel Hanagid Street today in Jerusalem. Keren Kayemet buys the place for him, and he starts to, let's say, disseminate this ideology in his school. The ideology is to really to bring the time, let's say, of the heroic times of the past, of the Bible and the Hashmonean period, the Maccabean period, to life again. So his director in this is, in this case, Bezalel, who built the temple menorah, that will become important in our story as well. So here's Bezalel telling Borishatz of how to do the New Jerusalem. Yes, I mean, how to create the new city based on this vision of the past, taking away 2,000 years of diaspora, forgetting about them, and let's say, return to the glory of the past. So Borishatz, even before making Aliyah, before coming to the Holy Land, he makes this statue, very famous one, based again on this ideology that he learned from Herzl, from Ben Yehuda, from Leon Pinsker, and many others who wrote about the Maccabees in this period. And he makes this statue that we see on the left of Mattathias, the father of the 5 sons. And Mattathias is holding a knife and is calling for the revolt. And I just want to remind you what we saw last week of Gustave Doré, of how Mattathias, a priest that kills a person because he bowed down to the defiled sacrifice in the temple. So here's this movement of Mattathias that Borishatz did. The statue, by the way, is lost. Is very, of course, fitting the sentiments of the time, like calling the Jews to come, to unite, and go to the Holy Land and liberate it. And this image, by the way, was put on some of the Hanukkah lamps that were created by Bezalel, like this one that we see here. Okay. Other lamps that are making Bezalel people are doing Hanukkah lamps. It's like this one. And what show, although it looks very traditional, and many of the Hanukkah lamps Bezalel created look traditional, but they have new designs on them that express the sentiments that I'm mentioning. You see the name of the school, Bezalel Yerushalayim here, Yerushalem, that's how they wrote it in this period, in like the second decade of the 20th century. It has in the many circles here that contain ancient coins. I mean, these are replica, a lot imitation of how these ancient coins look like. And so then put 2 coins here in the center, and 3, I'm sorry. One is here, a top that is not really a coin, it's something they made up of the Hanukkah, of the lamp of the temple lit to connect it with Hanukkah. And there are 2 coins that are based on actual ancient coins. So the coin here on the left is the coin of Bar Kochva. The coin of Bar Kochva, and of course not by accident that Borishatz and his students select that, because Bar Kochva was the leader of the revolt against the Romans. And so, on his coin, moreover, on the coin, we see the facade of the temple with the Holy of Holies inside. So there is the 4 pillars. I just want to remind you what we saw a second ago is the facade of the temple in the model of the Jerusalem temple of Aviona, with the same type of facade, with the 4 pillars. We don't see inside because the doors are closed, and here we see inside. And except that there's one addition on the coin, is the star above, to like a symbol of Bar Kochva, the son of the star, the symbol of the Messiah. Is that Darach Kochav Miyaakov, it's on, the verse goes. So he is the symbol of the Messiah, and so he appears like the one who will rebuild the temple, like this is what Borishatz probably thinking about, not really rebuilding the actual temple, but to make Jerusalem glorious as it was. So another Hanukkah lamps of Bezalel, we see now events from the stories of the Maccabees. Yes, I mean that depict the story that was, as I said before, hidden on Hanukkah lamps or not shown in such a way. Remember, we saw Judith that was very prominent, but here are now events from the book of Maccabees that are depicted on the lamp, like this one. Here is another one that you see now lighting the lamp. The high priest is lighting the lamp and one is serving him. You see the jar for which, like we saw before, yes, so is complete revival of this history through images that we see on several of the early Betzalel Hanukkah lamp. Now they light the lamp here, the priest and another priest who helps him, and there are people who are dancing and doing the Levite services in the temple. Okay, so as I said, Boris Schatz was involved in something that is very interesting. We have in the Jewish tradition a long history of visiting the tombs of the holy people of the past, whether from the Bible, the tomb of Rachel, or the patriarchs in Me'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron, and those from the Talmudic period and so on. But the tombs of the Maccabees were not really something that anyone was interested in. No one came to the Holy Land, traditional, to make pilgrimage to the tombs of the Maccabees, and even it wasn't known where they are. So here is now the Zionist movement is creating, based on the Jewish tradition, tombs of holy people from the past that are not really holy, but they are holy in the eyes of the Zionist movement. So actually, in the second half of the 19th century, some of the archaeologists working in the Holy Land, non-Jewish, like Clermont-Ganneau and some others, are starting to search for these people. And I remind you that in Christianity, the stories of the Maccabees were more important than in Judaism in the past. So they find this Palestinian village near Modi'in of today, and that's how it's called, Modi'in, by the way. So this village that's called Al-Midia, near Ramallah, between Modi'in and Ramallah. And they decide that this is the ancient Modi'in because the name sounds like Modi'in. And there is even like some archaeological sites that they start to excavate. And almost, you can say quickly, they decide on one of the spots that the Arabs called Qubur al-Yahud, the tombs of the Jews, to call it the tombs of the Maccabees. So here we have Kivrot HaMaccabim. So it's identified at that time, let's say the time that the Zionist movement is very active in the early years of the 20th century. And people start to visit it, and there are even negotiations to buy the place, to make it, let's say, kosher Jewish place. Actually, the person very much involved with this is Norman Bentwich, the head of the Zionist movement in Britain, and a friend of Herzl, and so on. So we have another connection that is of interest. So after many attempts, the place is identified, as I said, and this is it, and that's how they put the sign. And in 1909, there is the first trip of the children of the Gymnasia Herzliya from Tel Aviv, walking all the way to the tombs of the Maccabees. And so associations of Maccabees are founded in several places in Europe and other places later. We see how some of these, how they look like. The Maccabee becomes like a symbol of the new Jew, and sports and so on, as we know today. There are races from Modi'in to Tel Aviv, Merotz HaLapid, that also were founded early on at that time. And of course, there are the meetings of all the sports people that are the Maccabiya, as we know it very well, until today. And there is even Bira Maccabi, as a Maccabi beer. You want to be strong, here is your symbol. And this, by the way, this emblem that we see on the left, of the beginning of Bira Maccabi with the Maccabean person sort of look. Okay, and of course we have Maccabi Tel Aviv and so on and so forth. And even some people found new meaning for the word Maccabi. We see Maccabi Tel Aviv here, the basketball team of Tel Aviv. And of course there are many players that joined the group that are not local, you can say. And so some said Maccabi is abbreviation of Mikan Bichlal Yehudi. Who among all this is Jewish? But this is just a joke on this. Anyway, okay, so something that is happening. We have a few more minutes. I want to show a few more items. Something that is happening at that time that is also of big interest is you look at the Maccabees as a model, but not only, again, as I said, in the yeshiva. You want really to practice it. So there are like Jewish, or you can say, troops that are beginning to be organized. HaShomer is one of them. Bar Giora is another. You see the cemetery of HaShomer in Kfar Giladi, and were some members of this group that was founded in 1909, exactly the same year of the first visit to the tomb of the Maccabees. You can see it, and there you can read the slogan that became very popular in this time, בדם ואש יהודה נפלה, בדם ואש יהודה תקום, in fire and blood Judea fell, in fire and blood Judea shall rise. ארגון השומר, yes, the name is written, this is in Kfar Giladi. And we have things like that now going to other places in the Jewish world, especially in Europe. Here is from Germany. We now back to Germany. Dieburg, Ken Betar Dieburg, the branch of Betar in Dieburg in Germany, in Hesse. בדם ואש יהודה נפלה, בדם ואש יהודה תקום. And this one is from Chicago. Yes, from the 1920s, Jews want to fight as Jews. There's a poster from that time. And here in Eretz Israel, Ze'ev Rabban is creating this beautiful image of the daughter of Zion leading now the Jewish troops, the Gdudim Ivrim, or the Jewish Legion that was founded at the time. And she is carrying a shield with the 12 tribes of Israel. Behind her is the Lion of Judah that is breaking the chains of the diaspora, and she's carrying a flag to march with them to the liberation of the Holy Land. So the Hanukkah lamps created in this period, until the State of Israel is founded, is one like this that, by the way, I found it in the flea market some years ago. Very surprising to find, handmade, and it has a symbol on the front that we'll see in a second what it is. And at the bottom behind, when you turn it down, there is this verse again, Bedam be'esh uvadam, that we just read, in fire and blood, and the name of the person who made it, Lubetsky, and the name of the place where he made it, Mizraah. So Mizraah, you do a little research, and you see it was a prisoner camp of Etzel and Lehi people of the British. I mean, the British mandate. In the British mandate, they put the fighters for freedom, you can say. At least that's how everyone interprets this in a different way. But anyway, that's how these people saw themselves. And when he's in prison, he makes for himself this Hanukkah lamp, and he writes his name and the place, and these words, Ba'eshuv Adam. So this is the symbol of the Etzel that we have on our lamp. And let me go back to it now. You can see it here. Yes. That shows the map of Eretz Israel, Jewish Eretz Israel in their opinion. And beneath is written Rakach, only in this way, that we fight with the rifle, we can get this area. And this Hanukkah lamp, again, I remind you, we are talking about Hanukkah lamps. Here is another Etzel lamp from this period. And now it's made from shells of bullets and mines and so on, yes, to make the point even stronger. Now we're almost toward the end of my lecture, and I want to show you a few things that happened when the state was founded. So in 1948, the State of Israel is created, and the emblem of the state is the menorah from the Arch of Titus. After all this talk, you understand almost without any introduction why this was selected, and it's best explained in this caricature. Here is the new government that is now founded in Jerusalem, the first Knesset, the first government that is bringing back the menorah of Titus to Jerusalem, the symbol of the Maccabees that was when it was taken, it was a symbol of diaspora, and now it's returned to Jerusalem with Ben Gurion here, Golda Meir is here, and other members of the first government, and they're going toward Jerusalem, the walls of Jerusalem, bringing back the menorah taken by the Romans. So the lamps created in these years, like this one that we see here, emphasize this ideology, and instead of showing the emblem of the state where the Jews came from, let's say the double-headed eagle or the cardinal emblem that we saw and so forth, or the Ottoman Empire, here we see, of course, the emblem of the new state, and it says Keter Malchut, the crown of kingdom, the new kingdom of the Jews, you can say. This menorah was created shortly after independence, and there are two shofarot here that announce the arrival of the end of days, you can say almost, and the emblem of IDF of Tzahal above. All these are now put together. Show you one or two more examples that you see how it looked in that time. So Hanukkah, the holiday of the Maccabees, became the holiday of the state of Israel, of the young state of Israel, showing these emblems together. Here again, the emblems of the army and the new state, and on a Hanukkah lamp, and it says Nes Gadol Haya Po, meaning the new miracle that just happened and the creation of the land. Okay, I'll skip maybe one, and maybe let's end with this, something like this that I want to show you now, how the soldiers of IDF in this period, I'm speaking about 48 to 56, 57, until almost the end of the 50s, are like those who continued the traditions of the Maccabees. So here we see, these are postcards, these are New Year cards, where Judah the Maccabees passing the torch to an IDF soldier, and here is the same with Migdal David behind, to show again something from the past, and Moshe Dayan is here, and so on. In this caricature you see from now, from the 1956, when Israel won the Sinai War. So we see the young Israel and looking at heaven and looking at the models, Judah the Maccabee, King David and Joshua bin Nun. So Judah is joining now what we saw in Christian art of the past, the three heroes of the Jewish heroes of the past, Joshua, King David, and Judas are now also in the model for the Jews. Yes, and he's asking them, what do you think of me? So in this slide, I want to show maybe the last one. We see we don't have time for more. So you can see this Rulik, this new Israeli, this new hero, the one who inherited the heritage, you can say, of Joshua, David, liberated the Holy Land, liberated Jerusalem and the temple again. He's holding the Hanukkah lamp, his symbol of pride and independence. Okay, so I think you got the point, although there are more examples as well, but I think the main point is clear of how the holiday really changed its, let's say, its ideals and ideas through the lamp. And when you take, let's say, a line of lamps and comparing them and seeing how they were created and what they meant in a generation, you understand how a simple object, a naive one, most cases created by unknown artists, can tell you the story in a very interesting and I think unjudgmental way, because these people are doing it. They are not thinking that they will be put in a museum or will be examined by scholars and things like that. It's done from the feelings of the people, you can say, from what they feel about this. And in this way, we have a treasury of items to tell us the history. Okay, so toda rabba, and exactly 9. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Professor Sabar. I'm sure all of us, as we light our candles next week on our Hanukkah, this will give us a total different outlook, and we'll wonder if maybe in 200 years someone will be studying our Hanukkah and what to learn about our history today. Thank you very much. Wishing everyone a happy Hanukkah here from Jerusalem to wherever you are around the world. Thank you very much, Professor Sabar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.